Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition with Newcomb. It is one-on-one with Mike Hermann, the project lead at RetroSoft Studios. Mike, welcome to the show. Glad you could make it here today. Hopefully not taking you too far away from your projects and all your work. So how's everything?
Very good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, glad to have you here. Mike, like I said, you're on the verge of a big release coming out from your studio. RetroSoft Studios, that is correct?
Yep, RetroMania Wrestling coming soon.
RetroMania Wrestling. Well, you know, I can't remember the exact date when I caught onto it, and I think it might have been through social media, but I saw pictures of this game, and immediately I was intrigued. I was like, wow, okay, this game looks awesome. And first thing I noticed was it reminded me of an old school wrestler that I used to love back in the arcade, and that was WWF Wrestle Fest. I think it was 1991 when that came out. So that really brings us back, right?
Yeah, 30 years almost.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's been a long time, and wrestling games certainly have evolved in many ways, and I think in some areas I think they might have even regressed. And I got a question about that a little bit later on. So I mean, first, I guess the first question, Mike, for you, for those who don't know you, is just kind of give us a little bit of background about RetroSoft Studios and about your involvement in the project.
Okay. So RetroSoft Studios was formed in 2018 specifically to make RetroMania Wrestling. It may grow into something more than that, but right now that company was started with the main project being the official sequel to WWF Wrestle Fest, which is RetroMania. My background, I have a background in software engineering, but this is my first game that I am developing. I'm not doing it by myself, though. I'm definitely the least qualified person on my team as far as game development goes. Everyone else has a lot of experience who's helped out on the project for sure. So we've been at it since, not full time. We've grown. I'd say we really started hitting hard where the team grew in 2019. In 2018, it was just me and one other person. And then 2019 is when we really started picking up speed, and that's when we started marketing a little bit, trying to get our name out there, and then here we are.
Fantastic. So back in 2019. So, I mean, at this point in time, how is the progress going? I mean, how far along would you say you are in the project? Is there a lot to add? I mean, that's one of my questions is obviously the release date, but I heard you on your little podcast the other day, and it looks like you still might be a little ways off. You didn't give anything definitive, but where are you guys in the project? How are you feeling about it up to this point?
I mean, I feel pretty good. It's just the last 5% takes like 100% of the effort, it seems, which is kind of an old. I forget what the actual saying is, but in software engineering, it's something like the last 5% takes 90% of the work. Something where the math doesn't necessarily make sense, but I feel really good about it. But there's so much polish we want to do, and one of the things I'm very conscious of, and in a unique situation, whereas I'm running the project, I'm funding the project. We don't have a publisher, we're self-publishing, so I really only have to answer to myself and our fans, and really specifically, especially the ones who've pre-ordered already. We started pre-orders at March of this year, maybe the end of February. And some people have been waiting very patiently since February. So we definitely want to. That's why we do the weekly updates and try to keep everyone informed. So as you said, we haven't given a definitive release date yet. It's coming. We're going to be announcing something very shortly. We're going to draw a line in the sand, and we're going to hit that date. And I'm trying to make sure when we do announce that we hit it. There's going to be no ifs, ands, or buts. If anything, we'll release before that release date. That's what I want to make sure of.
Well, I love the fact you've got a pretty inclusive roster right now that seems to be growing all the time. And like I said, graphically, I mean, it's a sprite-based game, but it looks fantastic. Like I said, it's as soon as I saw the first pictures, I went, wow, this reminds me of WrestleFest, and I didn't know it at the time. But like I said, you are the official sequel. Now, obviously, you're not part of the WWE license,
right.
That sort of thing, but you do have some wrestlers on that roster, obviously, that have been through various big circuit wrestling events. Some guys who have, I guess, dabble into WWE at some point in time.
We're currently in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, a couple of the biggest names I noticed right off the bat that, two of my favorite wrestlers of all time was the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal. Pretty sad to hear about Animal passing
Yeah.
recently. How did that make you feel? I mean, obviously, and I'm sure, did you get any input from Animal or at all during the process?
I mean, I've talked to him a couple times. He really was looking forward to promoting the game. He had sent me an email unsolicited a couple weeks ago, actually saying, "When you launching, keep me in mind of whatever you want to do. I'm here to help." Which was really cool of him. And then that was, unfortunately, that was the last time I had contact with him. He, it was horrible news when we found out, and he wasn't. 60's not really that old
No.
anymore, and it was just a shame. But, we were going to do our best to remember him fondly in RetroMania.
Yeah, and it really is sad, and it's weird because just a few weeks prior to his passing, I was actually watching a documentary with him and his son, and they obviously went into details and how the loss of Hawk really affected him, his life. Those guys have been tag team partners for so long, and they went through so much together. But how he was such a polarizing, different guy in and out of the ring. Those two guys were larger than life. And
For sure.
and they're definitely going to be missed. But it's glad to see them, like I said, immortalized in your game, and definitely can't wait to. They're probably going to be one of the first few wrestlers I pick up when I purchase my copy of it. And I'm really excited about that. But let's get back to some questions at hand. Again, big shout out to the people watching the podcast right now, and those of you who will catch up on the replay. Yeah, we've got some great questions lined up here for Mike. Something's going on here, guys. Sorry, I hit the wrong button here. I think I've got a different browser going on here. So Mog Z is in the chat. Emmanuel A1, Mr. Glass, guys, welcome. A lot of these guys are regulars to my Gaming After Dark podcast, which I do on Tuesday evenings. So Mike, yeah, let's get into some more questions. Tell us about some of your past projects that you were involved on, and perhaps what has been your biggest accomplishment up to this point.
Well, I won't not really want to bore your audience with a bunch of accounting and finance projects that I've worked on. So that's really my background, is accounting and finance software and stuff like that. But some other, I'd say, more related to what I'm doing now. I've been involved in some hobby projects. Most notably, probably I helped out. There's a fighting game or engine really called Mugen, if you're familiar with that. But it's a kind of thing where you can put your own characters in a fighting game. It's a fighting game engine. And when my kids were younger, there was a show called Superhero Squad with Marvel superheroes on it, and there was I started looking around to try to find a fighting game or something like that for them that they could work on very easily. And I found this little project called Pocket World, and by a group called the Scruffy Dragons, and they were doing this DC universe Pocket World with like Batman, Joker, Superman, a whole bunch of other guys. So I got involved in that project. I started helping out with artwork as far as commissioning it, and donating that, and then also doing a little bit of programming, learning kind of on the job, and working with that team to release Pocket DC Universe. So it was a really cool project to be involved with. I did not a ton of the work, but the one thing it did help me with is working with artists, learning kind of how scripting works in a game engine and things like that. So it was a nice little thing. And then other than that, I've really just dabbled in programming, dabbled in as far as game programming and things like that. So I don't have a ton of experience. It's mostly just kind of been hobby related stuff.
Well, that's very interesting because obviously now, like I said, you kind of took the bull by the horn. So how did RetroMania Wrestling really come about? When did you sort of brainstorm that and say, hey, I'm going to do this project. I'm going to do a game, that's going to bring back the old school to a lot of the new school, and just get that out there. And like I said, it looks amazing. I know a lot of people that are wrestling fans can't wait to get their hands on it. So how did it all come about, though?
Yeah, I would say back around 2010, I would say it's kind of when the idea formed. And at that time, it started out as a hobby project. I was just going to code the WrestleFest engine from scratch, rip the sprites out of the original game, and then be able to add additional characters to it. And that's kind of how it got started. And I started writing the engine, but with running another business, having a family, and a hobby kind of takes a back seat. So I'd pick it up for 3 weeks and put it down for 3 months, and I just couldn't make any progress on it. So I put it down for a couple of years, and then eventually I started looking at it again and saying, well, let me look and see if this could be a viable product that people would be interested in, more than just me and the Wrestling Legends forum, which is where I was posting some stuff about it. And looking at how wrestling games had sold, and really the lack of wrestling games on the current gen platforms, being the Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and even PC. You basically are, regardless of what we do, we're going to be one of the top 5 wrestling games on every console, because there aren't 5 wrestling games on any console. So I think it's definitely an underserviced market. And then the other thing that kind of put the nail in the coffin for me to do the project commercially was WWE signed that $1 billion TV deal with NBC or Comcast, and I just thought there's room for more wrestling video games. There's a market for wrestling, obviously, and I'm super passionate about it. And not to say that money's the driving factor behind this project, because it's not, but it's definitely will be a nice bonus if we can do well on this.
Well, I certainly hope it works out for you, and I have a very good feeling that it will. I mean, I can't remember if I put this in my questions down the thing, but you're totally right. I mean, we've saw over the years, especially in previous generations, there was quite a bit of competition, not only in the 2D 2D arcade wrestling games, but there was a lot of entries in the 3D realm as well. When the N64 came out, wrestling games started to hit sort of a pinnacle, a peak, so to speak, with the games like WCW versus NWO and WWE WrestleMania, and there was a list goes on. That sort of thing. And over the years, we really haven't seen anything outside of pretty much the 2K series of games. And while I feel that they're good in ways, there's also various things missing from those games as well. And we've started to see the 2K series drop off. I mean, as a matter of fact, this year they didn't even decide to publish 2K 21, is it? I think it was. So they decided to go with WWE Battlegrounds instead. So that was an interesting change of pace. So yeah, I totally agree, man. Like, I'm glad that you're making this game, because there is a market for it. And the only game that I can recall in the last little while outside of those 2K games have been Fire Pro Wrestling. I'm sure you're probably familiar with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm a fan.
And they went with that Studio 3D sort of over the top view, where you're again more from the traditional WrestleFest view on the game. So It was good to see them with that. That game did fairly well as far as I could tell, but I never did pick it up. Hopefully, don't be ashamed. I don't buy every wrestling game. As a matter of fact, I kind of lost interest in the wrestling games over the years, simply because I found they were too much reliant on simulation aspects and got away from the things that I loved about the old wrestling games, which are just more fun, more arcadey. Still had the graphics progressed over the years, but that's what I find with sports games, is they just start to gravitate to areas that the average gamer just starts to fall out of love with. You want something quick, easy to pick up and play and just have fun with it. And all these sports games, man, are just getting crazy.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So that's why I'm really excited for your wrestling game, because again, it takes me back to the times when wrestling games were fun but simple, and it's all about gameplay, because God knows, if we look at the N64 wrestling games, those games today look like absolute trash.
Right.
But they performed well. They had, they had enough of the things that you wanted in a wrestling game. So we got some more great questions, man. I'm going to try to keep this rolling on. I don't want to keep you too long. So obviously, and segueing off of that, RetroSoft Wrestling is the spiritual successor to the Technos Arcade Classic WWF Wrestle Fest. So what did you really borrow from that game, and how do you feel you can sort of improve on that formula, Mike?
Yeah, so I think the presentation, as far as like little things, like when you're playing what we call the Retro Rumble, the little promos that pop up in the bottom corner, the taunts, similar taunts, moving around in the ring. The sprites though our camera is pulled back a little bit more than the original WrestleFest was, specifically because of gameplay purposes of having more than one character, I thought was a kind of a an annoying thing if you had played with more than one person on the original, where if you were all the way on the left and they were all the way on the right, one of you were cut off the screen. So we made a couple changes like that. That changes being able to fight out the side of the ring more. I know you could do it in the original WrestleFest, but we can move around a lot more in our stages as well. Just adding more wrestling moves in general. It was pretty limited, the original WrestleFest, where there was probably under 30 moves in the entire game completely, where we have a couple hundred in our game. So
wow.
Yeah, we've added a lot of stuff that was not in the original, but tried to keep that same presentation level. The introductions, the big logos that pop up on the screen. The entrance walk is very similar to the original as well. So if you didn't know better, and if you didn't compare them side by side, you might even think, "Wow, this is WrestleFest 2. What is this?"
Well, absolutely. Like, it's again, as soon as I saw the pictures, that's, first thing I thought about. And then I got more details on, I was like, wow, but I recognize a lot of guys on the roster. And like I said, immediately got excited. And I'm probably going to buy this. I'm probably going to double dip on this game, because I'm probably going to buy it for my Switch to play it on the go. And I'll probably buy it on my Xbox so I can, body slam down in the basement. So
Right.
that's going to be awesome. What's going on, Infinite? Anthony Chipmunk, Juan Castillo, guys, Dead Proof, Snoog City. Thanks for joining us here, guys, with the project lead Mike Herman from Retrosoft Studios. Speaking of Retrosoft, how big is the studio? I mean, how many people have you got, I guess, intertwined in all this?
I would say from start to finish, we're probably over 20. Not all at one time though. So I would say 20 different people, around more or less. And I'm actually in the process of putting the credit roll together. So I got to make sure I don't forget anybody there that's contributed to the game. There's really two programmers, one lead programmer and one secondary programmer on the game. And then, we have two other guys who just did moves that are still cleaning some stuff up for us now. And then the rest has all just been artists for the most part. We've had the one thing, as a first-time developer that we underestimated was the amount of artwork required to do a 2D wrestling game versus a 3D. And initially I was looking at using like 3D models versus 2, and then try to just make them look 2D, but I couldn't. This is really WrestleFest. Like, that's the big driver around this. And so you can't really fake that 2D sprite look with 3D. So that the art, just the amount of artwork we had, and there's some decisions we probably made that we could have saved a lot of time and money. But I will know that for the sequel.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's interesting, because that's another thing. Like the wrestling games that come out over the years have definitely all had various different art styles. Because there was also the one that was pretty big in the arcade, and it came out on home console. I think it was WWE WrestleMania, and it used the Mortal Kombat sort of digitized wrestlers,
yep.
which was really cool at the time. Very limited in the animational aspect, but very cool at the time, because the wrestlers actually started to look like the real deal, right? And that was definitely pretty cool. So I love your art style, like I said, because I actually still to this day I think the WrestleFest game is still one of the most impressive and coolest looking games. At the time it was in the arcade, had the very bright graphics, the larger than life characters. And it was a lot of fun. But like I said, I'm excited to see what your game does, because you have a lot more moves. Looks like a lot more modes, different things.
Yeah, more modes, more venues as well.
Yeah. And before we go, I'll get you to kind of run down what's in the game as well. I got some great questions here. Tallying off of that, how did the involvement come from the wrestlers signed in this game? Like I said, the first names I recognize were Tommy Dreamer, the Road Warriors. I mean, like, how did you get those guys on board? How does that come about in the process? I'm sure when you started, you probably didn't think about anybody at first. Licensing and all that stuff can be one of the hardest things to secure, one of the most expensive aspects of gaming. So how did you get these guys involved? What's the process in that? And is everybody excited to be a part of it?
Yeah, so the answer to the last one is we got great reaction from everybody. So the first thing, actually, originally I was going to go with YouTube personalities as the wrestlers, because I was kind of intimidated by the idea of even trying to contact wrestlers or anyone in entertainment, really. Like I said before, my background's in finance and accounting, which isn't the most glamorous of career paths to take. But I decided, let me look online and see if I can contact one of these guys. So I said, well, I set the bar high. I said, well, if we're going to make a sequel to WrestleFest, and at the time we were the spiritual successor, not the official sequel.
Yeah.
But I said, what's the tie-in going to be, and who's available? Like, who can we get? And I said, well, it'd be great to have the boss of the original game, which was the Road Warriors. So I reached out to one of these online booking agents who happened to have a contact for Animal, and we got in touch with them, and it wasn't all that difficult to get him signed. A little bit of negotiation, and that was it. And he was excited to be on board. But the next best thing I did was I went on LinkedIn, and I knew I needed somebody with some more experience than I had, one in the video game space and one in the wrestling space. So I hit the nail on the head, because I got a gentleman by the name of Mike Archer, who was a former WWE employee and before that worked at Acclaim Entertainment doing wrestling games. So he had a lot of contacts. He already had Tommy Dreamer's number. He called him, and we signed him in a day. And he really was instrumental in getting out most of the signings. There was a couple I handled myself that a friend of mine knew the Blue Meanie. So I got his cell phone number, just gave him a call, and he was interested. And then, Mike already knew Stevie, and I become friends with Stevie, who's been awesome to talk to and get to know over the course of time. Nick Aldis in the NWA has been awesome. Mike already had a previous relationship over there. Nick's been great. He's done some voiceover work for us for the 10 pounds of gold mode that he's featured in. And really just, Johnny Retro, as we call him, John Hennigan. He was easy to deal with. Luckily, we signed him before he had signed anything to go back to the WWE. But every guy, we got Matt Cardona and Brian Myers, recently, former Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins. Mike knew those two guys. They were easy to deal with. We called them the day they got released, because they have their whole wrestling figure retro collection in and of itself, and they just happened to be a good fit with what we were doing. So everybody really, for the most part, was really enthusiastic. They were happy to be called, to be asked a part of it. There were a couple names, I don't want to name names, but there were a couple people that turned us down, wanted more money than we could afford.
Right.
They might or might not have been worth what they were asking, in my opinion. Some of them were, and we just couldn't afford it. Some of them I didn't think were. But for the most part, I'm pumped about our roster. I think it's a nice mix of current guys, legend guys, indie guys, and we hope to expand it over time.
Absolutely. Well, can I make a suggestion to you, just in case? I think your game is going to blow up. I think a lot of people will definitely get in on it. And if obviously, once you start seeing some proceeds from the game and stuff, maybe you could sign as a possibility of signing Mr. T for the game.
I thought about that. And then I'm thinking, well, if I could get him, could I get Piper and Orndorff?
Oh,
and then Hogan owns his own stuff. The only problem with that is his asking price is pretty high.
I would imagine, yeah.
So we actually reached out to somebody that's an agent or somebody that has a contact with him, and we were not even in the ballpark. We weren't even playing the same sport at this point. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm open to it. I think that would be pretty cool to have somebody like Mr. T.
That'd be awesome. Are you recording any of the actual wrestlers? Are you doing any sound bites for the game at all? I know that's pretty difficult, especially with the COVID and stuff like that. So, yeah. Are you doing any voices, or is it just straight up their personas on screen?
It's mostly personas on screen, but like I alluded to, we have a 10 pounds of gold mode, and we do have, similar to Saturday Night's main event mode in the original WrestleFest.
Yeah.
Where it's a singles match that, well, you do more than just singles. There may be a 3-way, a 4-way match in there as well. But you play through and to try to become the NWA champion, and you will have there'll be an interview segment with Joe Galley and Nick Aldis in there as well. Oh, so he did, the two of them did some voiceover work, and then Colt Cabana actually and Ian Riccaboni from Ring of Honor did some voiceover work for us as well.
Awesome. Well, I hope all the guys that are showing up here in our chat today are excited about the game. I certainly am. Mark Caldera, what's up? Dark Saya, back from the dead. Juan Castillo, Infinite, Matt Burns, Pang 911. Guys, thanks for being here. I am with Project Lead Mike Hermann from Retrosoft Studio, RetroMania Wrestling, the official sequel to WrestleFest. Coming out soon. The date is not set, but I'm sure Mike will keep us in the loop if and when it gets ready to drop. Now, Mike, I mentioned COVID. This has probably been one of the most challenging years in the history of video gaming on every single level. New consoles coming out, games trying to release. We've seen a lot of delays. We've seen a lot of setbacks this year. Obviously, it's very hard to keep a team kind of together and focused when again you can't really be together. So the question is, how has COVID really changed the way that you interact with your team and how you've been doing work on the game, and how do you even try to stay on track during this development?
Well, I'd say the way we interact really didn't change at all. We are strictly remote. This is our office. I'm sitting in it, and I'm the only one who's ever in it. So we're 100% remote. We have people on 5 different continents working on the game. I lost track of the number of countries that we've had in and out of here. But so in that regard, we weren't really affected, but we were very affected just in general. Everyone on the team experienced something, maybe not directly, but a family member or a friend of a friend or something that slowed us down, and definitely being preoccupied with it. We just lost some traction the last couple of months, to the point where, which is why I decided just not to when we missed our initial launch, which was going to be July, I didn't have a good understanding of when was going to be the right time to release. It just, we want to polish the game up a lot. So it's definitely affected us for sure. Just not directly. It's mostly been indirectly.
Right. Definitely, I guess, different challenges for massive teams that are normally used to working out of the same studio, right?
Right.
So
yeah, we don't have to deal with any of that.
Gotcha. If you could add, and you kind of alluded to this, but is there any dream sort of wrestler, theoretically, some of these guys, like you probably would like to have in there, but it's not going to happen due to either massive, amount of money to take to get them in, or contractual obligations, stuff like that. But I mean, if you could have a dream wrestler through this game, who would it be? And obviously, do you plan on expanding the roster through DLC potentially down the road?
Yeah, so the one guy, and this may depend on what age you are, you may not even know him, but Magnum TA was my favorite wrestler growing up. So those of you not familiar with Magnum TA, he was going to be the next big thing. He was the United States champion in the NWA circuit. He had a phenomenal feud with Tully Blanchard and Nikita Koloff. He was running with Dusty Rhodes, the Road Warriors, the Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez, a bunch of other those guys, Rock and Roll Express, that like 1984-85 time frame. Before that, he was in Mid-South. And I was a huge fan of his. He was my first favorite wrestler by far. So he is currently under some type of deal with somebody, and we're hoping he gets off of that and we'll be able to get him in the game, because I definitely want him in. At some point. And then we can recreate, since we have Nikita Koloff, who another phenomenal person, who I've had the privilege of meeting once, and I've traded emails with him. Great guy. I would love to have Magnum versus Nikita in RetroMania. So that's the one that really sticks out to me.
That is awesome.
There's a million other guys that I would love to have. And I tell this to a lot of people. We received this one email from somebody, I think it was a Twitter DM, and it said, "Hey, could you please add?" And then it just listed like 100 names. And my response was, I would love to, because legitimately, if I've heard of them, and it's really, especially from like the mid to late 80s to the early 90s, which is when it was my heyday of watching, where I'd never missed any show. I would love to add everybody, and but though I'm a fan of even the stuff today, midnight. I mean, I've always watched the product, and I've always stayed up on it. Maybe don't watch it religiously. Like 6 hours is a lot in 1 week. And that's just from the WWE, let alone everything else. AEW now, NWA I was watching religiously, Ring of Honor, everybody, Impact. what's Major League Wrestling. So there's just so many out there, but I mean, no one's off limits from getting signed to RetroMania. And I think we should be pretty enticing because after we've signed people, things have happened to them. Johnny Retro gets signed by WWE. Warhorse appears on AEW television. Chris Bay becomes champion at Impact Wrestling. So we're the pathway, or we're the bridge to wrestling superstardom.
You guys are like the opposite of the EA cover stars curse.
Exactly.
Everybody that seemed to end up on an EA game had either a terrible season the next year or got injured or something.
Yeah.
It was pretty crazy.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, personally for me, I'm a wrestling fan. I'm not going to sit here and say that I watch it intensely anymore and I'm super big on it like I used to be. And a large part of that's because a lot of the guys that I grew up idolizing either retired, got out of the business, they died, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So, I mean, my favorite in any wrestling game is this guy, and you'll probably know it right here. Oh, yeah. So good, can you dig it?
We tried.
Man, Randy Savage, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was
one of the first people we tried to get. We talked to his brother.
Lanny Poffo.
Yep. So we talked, and it was, I think, his widow owns the rights. They had a WWE deal, something like that.
Yeah. It's all good, man. It's all good. Like I said, you got a very impressive roster right now. I'm really impressed at how many guys you've already got on board for this game, and signature moves and stuff. That's fantastic. So, what has been the biggest challenge for you, Mike, in making this game so far? What's been the biggest part?
Really, the biggest challenge has been you don't know what you don't know. So just going through this, again, my background software engineering, so I've been through plenty of project plans and plenty of projects to kind of know in general what to look out for. But the art pipeline and really how important it is to nail that down, because we didn't, and we made some mistakes that cost us time. It cost me money that we had to fix, or just because we're dealing with so many art assets in the game. Like we're talking, 1,100, 1,200 individual sprites per wrestler are in this game, and it's hard to manage everything. So I think just knowing like the art pipeline and how that goes into the design of the software, we've had a kind of for any programmers out there, an agile software approach where we're kind of building it, we're having a sprint, and then we're testing it, making changes, so on and so forth. So. That part of it, I think we've been on the ball with, but there's also, and I'm the biggest problem here, is like I'll see something, I'll be like, what would be really cool if we did?
Right.
And I give that to my lead programmer. He's like, yeah, but that's going to change this. I know, but it's really cool. So there's the scope creep and just adding features and knowing, like at some point we had to cut it off and be like, we got to get a game out. And we did that a couple months ago, actually, and we're still just trying to get polish and get everything in there and cleaned up and looking good.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, there's a lot of stuff that the average gamer out there has no idea, what ends up sort of on the cutting room floor. Some of the stuff may never see the light of day, or some of it will come out as a DLC, or perhaps it gets into a sequel sort of thing, right?
Right. Yeah, it's just there's so much you want to add, especially this is such a passion project for me. Initially it started off, I just wanted to make a clone, but then, when we get into it, there's certain things. The original WrestleFest was an arcade machine, so they had specific design patterns in that game to make you put quarters into the game. Mm-hmm. Like being eliminated in the Royal Rumble within 10, like not even 10, like 2 seconds, because you run at somebody and they backdrop you and you're out of the ring and you're done. Right. Or they pick you up in body. So we actually still have some of that in, because that's also kind of the mystique of the original game was, I could get eliminated at any point. We would definitely want to keep that in for sure. Yeah. But there's other things like just they'd make the Road Warriors would just have twice the health bar and do twice the amount of damage, and you did half the amount of damage. So force you to put quarters in, and things like that. So we had to make some changes to that as well.
And I'm guessing with the Xbox and the PlayStation platforms, you guys are implementing trophies and achievements as well, or?
Absolutely. We went out. Someone had reached out to me, and I took him up on his offer. He's in the trophy community, so to speak, an achievement community space, and it's something we definitely wanted to do right. And I'm not huge on trophies personally, but I have had certain games where I had to get everything, so I don't do that for all games, but if I really like a game, I think it definitely adds to the experience of the player to want to unlock everything and get all these trophies, and it's just a nice added bonus. So yeah, we have somebody, he's already written all of them out, and we're in the process of implementing them.
Well, it's good to know. And, I think most of the guys that I game with, a lot of us, we appreciate that they're there, but at the same time, they're not the be all end all, because
Right.
my favorite video game is the Gears of War franchise. But there's trophies in that honestly, like I'll never get to, like killing like 100,000 grunts or something. Like they have these crazy trophies, and I think they should all be accessible. I think there should be a certain ones sure left for the elitist. But a lot of games, some games they come way too easy. Some games they come too hard. How would you sort of gauge where yours kind of are for this particular game? Sort of in the mid ground, or
Yeah,
you
I would
gotta have
say
to
in the
put in a ton of
middle
hours?
ground. There's a couple easy ones and a couple really hard ones. I forget the final count, but we have a decent number in there.
Gotcha. Well, I'm sure. Like I said, the hardcore, the wrestling fans, people that really get into this game are going to be chomping at the bit to get to those really hard ones.
Right.
There's people out there just love that stuff. That's why I can't get into From Software games. They're just too punishing for me. I can't deal
Right.
with the constant respawn and go back, man. People say, "Oh, play it." I've tried. I played them, and I think they're fantastic games. I just can't. I just can't deal with, like, I get frustrated easy, and I'll just smash controllers. So
I've been there.
oh yeah. So, but some guys, man, I'm telling you, they're persistent.
Yeah.
Um,
No doubt.
So speaking of, like, and again, this kind of comes off of what you just mentioned, talking about the coding and different things go behind it. So, I mean, is it a huge challenge for your team to have the code this harder for the various platforms? Because there is such a large difference between them. You take something like the Nintendo Switch, for example, which is largely, inferior to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. I mean, it holds its own, but I mean, is there a lot of challenges associated with getting this game up sort of and running on different things, or not really?
No, not so. The platform, the engine we're using is called Game Maker Studio 2. And historically, it's been kind of a learning thing, an early entry point for younger programmers to get in, at least traditionally. But people have been using it now, especially more in the last 5 years or so, to do professional game development on it. And they have built into that an exporter for Switch, PS4, and Xbox One. And that's one of the reasons we went with it. We prototyped the game in it, when we first started. And I thought it was the ease of the 2D development, where something maybe like Unity and Unreal are definitely not kind of, but definitely better for 3D development. Game Maker definitely holds its own, and I preferred it to the 2D game development. So it exports out pretty seamlessly. Obviously, we're gonna have some work to do to get the ports ready, to get lot check done. And we're starting to go through that right now to make sure everything will pass certification. But for the most part, it hasn't been too difficult. Keeping in mind, we're doing sprite artwork. We're not doing any ray tracing or anything like that. So
Right.
not the Switch's hardware is by no means holding us up from doing anything.
Perfect. Yeah, that's good. It's good to know. Are you guys doing online for this particular game? Because I know a lot of the community gets pretty riled up when they find out that that there's a lot of potential or a lot of lost potential. We recently saw this with, Sega brought out the new Streets of Rage game, Streets of Rage 4, recently, and that did have the online co-op, and it worked phenomenal. And then you get a game like Battletoads, and the TXR podcast had one of their devs on, and he said, based on the game design, it just didn't lend itself well to online because they would have had too many latency issues. So are you guys doing the online, and would you say that's one of the most challenging aspects, if so?
Yeah, we're not doing it. We went down that road initially, and we had a lot of issues right out of the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought we laid some groundwork, so we hopefully will go back to it. That's the plan, at least. But I think for a first-time developer, I didn't want to bite off more than I could chew, and we were already biting off a lot just doing the game. We have 8-player local co-op on the game, and unfortunately, in this the timing of this world, there's not a lot of local party gaming going on right now, but hopefully that changes really soon. What I was really afraid of was what you said, where maybe not with Battletoads because they didn't put it in, but with games that have online play, and it just ruins the whole experience for people, and they get all this lag, and then you just get a bad rap. The game could be great, but if the online is advertised and it doesn't work,
Right.
then you get a bad reputation right out of the go. I'd rather prove we can do the single player, local multiplayer experience, and if we're successful, we've laid the groundwork to implement online later.
Well, I applaud you for that, and and I'm sure that the fans will be patient. And if this game, like I said, does well, you never know what the future might hold, right? So you can never say never, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I do applaud you, and I understand. Like I said, I think average gamers out there don't understand the amount of work, the amount of code work that goes into it. And again, when you got a small team, you don't have you don't have a whole team of testers and stuff, and there's so many variables that can go wrong once you put a game online. There's so many ways you can break games, and people it almost seems like there's people out in this world that will play a game just to break it, see how many little things you can do, or so I do applaud you, and I think at the end of the day, fans are going to be happy to have a very good looking and a very solid wrestling game. Because even in the chat, we got Mark Caldera. I miss the old wrestling games. The new wrestling games are garbage. I mean, that's all part of perspective. But I said at the top of the show, Mike, that the new games are great in their own respect, but they have lost the magic. There's something that's not there, and we've seen their sales start to quickly plummet. People just want quicker, easier to pick up games, stuff that you can enjoy with your favorite wrestler and just not feel like there's a massive learning curve. Even you see
Absolutely.
these UFC games, same thing. I love the UFC. I do enjoy the games, but my Lord, like you get in there and play them, and you're like, you almost need to know how to do martial arts yourself because there's just so
that
many.
Might be easier.
Oh, I'm telling you, the traversals and stuff. It's like, yeah, as soon as the guys grapple me to the ground, it's like, yeah, it's over. You want to stand up and fight? Yeah, we'll go. But yeah, down on the ground is different, And I found with the 2K stuff is heavily based on momentum and traversals and stuff like that. And if you don't really get that down, the timing and stuff, they can be tricky. So,
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, he said Mark Caldera, some of his best wrestling game memories are from WCW Nitro and the N64, right? They literally play it all night. Yeah, we know that. And like, hopefully we can all get 4 or 5 buddies together and we can jam out on RetroMania Wrestling, because that would be awesome. But like I said, in this COVID world right now, it's tough to get more than one person together, let alone a house of 4, but in due time.
Right.
So let's just see where we're at here right now on the questions. So we are on the verge of 2 big, and I don't know if this is really going to apply to you so much or not, but you can kind of just what it means to you in general, since it might be your next avenue, and that is we are on the verge of 2 big console releases with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. I mean, what does excite you most about these new amazingly powerful consoles right now?
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I still have a backlog of games to play on my PS3, I think, and Xbox 360.
We all have backlogs. Crazy.
I mean, mine is so long. The PS4, there aren't many, and I have them all. I play them all, but there's just not enough hours in the day. It's funny, when I was younger, I couldn't afford any of them. I could get one, and I had to trade in my old one for the new one every time the next generation came out. And I had a lot of time to play, but not any money to buy any games. Now I can buy the games, but I don't have any time to play them. So,
isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So, but I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I'm interested to see where VR goes. I'm interested to see if Microsoft does anything on that space. I haven't heard, and I'm not following it super closely. I'm interested to see how the PlayStation VR takes advantage of the PS5 hardware and see where that goes. I think that's really interesting space. And we could see some real innovations. The thing that I'm not too like the new sport. Like I was always a big John Madden football fan, and NHL hockey. Right when I went from my NES ice hockey to when the first time I played NHL hockey on the Sega Genesis, I was blown away. Right, then you see the Genesis to the PlayStation, and you're blown away again. And then to the PlayStation 2, I remember specifically Madden changing and being like, oh my God. But I think really after the jump from PS1 to PS2, PS2 to PS3 there's a good jump, but it wasn't the wow factor. And I don't really see the wow factor personally from the PS4 to 5 and the Xbox Series X to, you can see some stuff that they're doing in the cutscenes, but in the gameplay itself, I don't see it. I mean, it's definitely improved. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to say it's not, but the jump from console to console, I think, is not nearly as high as it used to be.
I think the graphic fidelity is starting to plateau to some degree.
Right.
And there is only so much, I mean, a programmer can do. And then again, it's all comes down to how big your team is, the kind of budget you got to work with, stuff like that. I agree. Some of the cutscenes, I think again, when you look at the average gamer, unless you're a real tech head, is you have to know what to look for in a game, right? And that's like, the different amount of textures and shaders and volumetric lighting and stuff like this, and the ray tracing and stuff, how that does affect the game. And sometimes you don't notice it until you turn on, say, a game. It's kind of like when you get your high-end PC and your low-end, and you turn off all the options on the low-end one or on the high-end one, and then you run them side by side, and you go, oh, wow, the game really looks different. But I agree with you. Excuse me, the impression factors is not as much as it used to be. I mean, you look at going from 16-bit to the 32-bit era, so on and so forth, and it does have slowed down because a lot of the last-gen games, I mean, I guess it's current technically last gen, like you look at PS3 and Xbox 360, some of those games still hold up and look amazing today. And I largely credit some of that too with the talent of the coders. If you go back and you look at the Epic Games, Gears of War from 2006 still looks like an amazing game. You look at stuff that Naughty Dog's done, some of the early Uncharted games still look very impressive, I think overall. So
I completely agree. So but you'll get those games that will come out, and then they'll I don't think we'll see them right away.
Yeah.
Once the developers have the hardware in hand for a little while, it may take a year or so, then maybe we'll start seeing some crazy stuff out of there.
I think so. I mean, already you see what Blue Point's done with the remake of Demon Souls, and that's like, whoa. That is some crazy stuff right there. And you're looking at, again, there's different levels of fidelity now where you see like the Xbox Series X is touting a lot of 60 frames now. I mean, PC players generally have been more used to that than the console generation, but it is nice to see frames per second or even constant and consistent frame rates. I think for a lot of gamers, it counts for a lot. Like I'm pretty cool with games at 30 as long as they're fairly consistent, but you see some games that legitimately chug. Matter of fact, I was actually playing Mafia 3 yesterday. There's actually 2 or 3 points in that game where the frame rates dropped so low, and this is even on the Xbox One X, that the game actually stopped. The sound was going, the game just stopped, and then would catch up and go again. It was like, okay. But anyway, not to get off track, but the jump is crazy, and I can't wait to see where we go over the next couple of years. Now this is going to be an interesting question, and I know you probably want to dive into this one. Perhaps might be the toughest question, I guess, overall. It's one that I know I've had some people say they wanted me to ask you. And one, I mean, obviously, is this game going to come to Game Pass? And how, what is your take on the subscription-based models? A lot of companies are doing this now. You see EA, that sort of thing, has been doing it for a couple of years, and now Microsoft has the Game Pass. PlayStation is PlayStation Now. I mean, do you think, ultimately this is going to help or hurt the indie development scene? Because I'm hearing, when it comes to that, I'm kind of hearing both sides, and some people are saying, some of these developers are suffering because of it, and other developers are saying, oh man, it's the best thing ever for our product. I mean, I don't know how you can answer it, or if you're timid on this one, but probably my hardest question I'm going to toss at you all day.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know the dollars behind it, so I'm assuming if you're approached by Microsoft, let's say, to be on Game Pass, they're giving you some lump sum to make it worth your while to put it on there. So if that's the case, I guess what's the worthwhile cost or price that you're getting paid for them to offer your game to their subscribers? And you got to look at it. I think for some people, the exposure is going to be worth it in and of itself, right? So if you're small and you don't have a marketing budget, and Microsoft comes to you and says, we want to put you on Game Pass, maybe it's a 30-day thing, and from that you're going to be able to get some sales out of that after the fact, plus a nice little check from Microsoft for Game Pass. So you got to look at the exposure that you would get from it, not just the dollars and cents from it. We've been approached by a couple different platforms, streaming services, a couple new smaller ones that are trying to get going, things like that. The one thing that concerns me with now Game Pass, you can download it, but the streaming services, and I know you didn't specifically ask that,
Yep.
but like a Stadia or Amazon just announced one, stuff like that, and they're going to offer the same thing. That you're going to get this plethora of games for a monthly price,
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it really depends on what your development budget is and what is going to be. Is it worth 2x? Is it worth 1.5x of development costs for you to produce that game? And then the point comes that a game is just a commodity where here's a budget. You're going to get, budget plus X to put your game on our service, and you're not going to, it's not going to be dictated on how much you make is going to be necessarily based on sales anymore. Then it's completely kind of changing the whole model of how games would get priced. And it's going to be like, well, it costs this much to make the game. We'll offer you this much because we think we can increase our subscriber base by X number of people if we bring your game to our Game Pass, right. or hang on to our existing client base if we add a game like this to Game Pass. So
yeah,
I don't know what the right or wrong answer is. I kind of gave a non-answer. I would say it's all going to come down to the financials. Really, it's going to be, if it's good for the developer, they'll do it. I know though, just one of the things I looked at was indie developers in general, 99% fail. Mm-hmm. Some may not even release their first game, and I get it. I mean, I've definitely overspent my budget. Yeah. From what I had, and luckily I had enough to cover it. But they cost a lot more, and some of these big titles, I don't know how the break-even point's got to be astronomical for them to even consider doing something like that. So you I know like EA in general, I think is the one that gets the bad rap for the in-app purchases and the microtransactions and all that, but they're spending millions upon millions of dollars now to create these games. And remember, when we were kids, and I'm probably a little older than you, but when I was a kid, games cost 50, 60. I remember Street Fighter 2 for the Genesis, I paid $80 for.
Yeah.
So game prices have not increased since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. So we're talking 30 some years ago. The price of a game hasn't changed, and I know development costs have done nothing but go up. Mm-hmm. So from a consumer standpoint, you want everything as cheap as possible, but from being on the other side of it, it's tough to make anything and it to be still maintain under $60. And like even RetroMania, it's a budget title. We're under $30. But even that was like, some people said you got to price it at $9.99, and I go, well, then I'm not going to make the game. Yeah, because it's just I'm not going to make my money back on it. And
that's right.
And not that I'm doing it again. Like I said, it's not the primary reason. And anyone who follows us on social media or watches any of my videos knows this is 100% passion project.
Yeah.
But with that said, I don't want to lose money on it. I could live with breaking even, but I don't want to really lose a lot of money on it. And I don't think we're going to. We've gotten such a great audience and everything. But, that's definitely was a concern going into it.
Well, Mark in the chat says,
my answer.
If Mark in the chat says, if Microsoft did approach you with the Game Pass deal, would you take it? And I guess it depends largely on where your game is at, if and when they approach you, and how much money and that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah. It would depend what they're offering for.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it seems like, like at first the games will come out, and it seems like, they tried to test the market and see how many copies they kind of sell right out of the gate. And then if things kind of stagger, and some games do really well, but then after, a 6-month period, a year period, they start to fall off. And then obviously you start to see them show up in those services, and you start to go, yeah, well, I guess at this point it's, like I said, and exposure is huge for any game, because right now there's so many games out there. I keep saying to my friends, I said, you go on the Nintendo Switch and you go on their eShop, and it's unbelievable. Like
Yeah.
when back in the Genesis era, like you had what, like you never see like 40 games released in a week. That was unheard of. And
Right.
now it's like every time I turn around, it's like this game, this game, this game, and people are like, have you played these games? I'm like, dude, where am I going to get the time or the
Right.
money to invest in all these games? I can't even get through the 40, 50-hour campaign games. I've been playing Ghost of Tsushima since the middle of July, for crying out
That's
loud.
on
I'm
my
still,
list.
oh my God. And it's like, this game is taking forever. I love it. It's a good kind of forever, but this is the thing. Like, this is the fight that as adults, especially,
Right.
you either got the time or you got the money. Very rarely have you got both.
Right.
Right. And you need money to buy games. And if you got the games and you don't have the time, it's kind of like you're just collecting them, and they're just sitting there,
Right.
like I said, adding to the backlog.
Right.
Fandom Kraken. I didn't know RetroMania existed. Now he's interested. There you go. So there's some benefits of podcasts like this. And this is
Absolutely.
why we do this, because we're trying to not only help our own platform, but we do love helping developers that are, getting going to help publicize the game. And hopefully at the end of this day, you sold at least a couple more copies than maybe you would have normally. So
No, I definitely appreciate it. I've done a lot of podcasts, and initially I was very intimidated. I had never been interviewed before in my life except getting a job interview.
right.
But I feel like I've relaxed a little bit, and I love doing it because I listen to podcasts. I've been turned on by a lot of podcasts that I'd never listened before after being on them. So I love it.
I feel
That's
the
one of
same
the
way.
things that's great. You can find people that are talking about stuff you're interested in. And they're pretty easygoing ones usually. So.
Well, I'm one of the few guys in the whole community that actually does a community game night each and every Saturday night. I generally pick a few games and try to get people from the community together to play those games online, and it's worked out pretty well. But I'm really shocked that I'm one of the few people that have been trying to organize it. Because I'm in the podcast game now with some pretty big names and a lot bigger channels than mine, but yet I'm one of the guys that, like I said, I practice what I preach. I am who I am, and when I come out, I say I'm going to hang out with the community. You got some guys that just they level up and they don't really interact after a while.
Right.
That maybe they're getting too big or whatnot, or maybe their egos are inflated. But I'll always be Noof Nukem, and the guys in my chat can tell you that if I say I'm going to play a game with someone, I play a game with someone. It's that simple. But I'm getting off topic here, but
no worries.
I only got a couple more questions for you. I'm going to let you go. Hope you're still doing okay for time.
Absolutely.
By the way, you are doing fantastic on this podcast and on this interview, because I spent 4.5 years in the radio business and as a DJ, and I've interviewed a lot of people, and I know, I've had both sides of the equation. I've had the great interviews, and you had the ones where it was like pulling teeth. So you were definitely not on the side of pulling the teeth, sir.
That's good to hear.
So obviously this goes back to early in the show. I mean, I watched your blog from the other day where you addressed people, and I think you had some people ask you that question. Obviously, you don't have a definitive release date for the game. You had a target for July, obviously didn't make it there. So I guess it's at this point, it's going to be ready when it's ready. But, with saying that, do you think there's a possibility that RetroMania Wrestling comes out this year, or is it starting to look potentially like maybe early next year? And with that, is there a potential for a physical release?
Yeah, so this is something we're struggling with because we want to put a date out, but we have to be sure we're going to hit it. I don't want to. My biggest concern is if we put a date out and we miss it again, because then that's really bad for PR. And even though if it's the right thing to do to miss it, excuse me, we definitely want to hit the next date we put on. So internally, we're discussing that right now.
Right.
And we hope to have an announcement very soon as far as when we're going to be at the date. And our thought process now is if we put it further out, we may release early. You know what I mean? Whatever date we pick is going to be the drop dead, no problem. We're definitely hitting that date. So, I mean, we're right up on that end of year time frame, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I come to a point where I'm going to say, you know what, another month, if we do our job right, no one's going to remember that we slipped another month. You know what I mean?
Right.
But then when you get the comments like Duke Nukem Forever and Guns N' Roses Chinese Democracy thrown your way, you kind of second guess yourself.
Right.
And it's tough though. It's like we set our initial date, back in 2018, we said first quarter 2020.
Yeah.
And then after we said that, I'm like, well, I should have just said WrestleMania, and that was going to be, that's what we were thinking. We were going to release the week before WrestleMania
That'd be cool.
this year.
Mhm.
And then, COVID hit, and then we pushed it to July. After doing a year and a half of development, we pushed it to July. Then COVID hit. After we had announced July, COVID hit. We probably lost 2 months of time, easy, if not more, because of that. And then just we lost time just from mistakes that we've made, that we've had to correct. But we're not going to use, the one thing I'm found, I don't want to use our release to find our bugs. So we've hired a couple more testers, or gotten a couple more testers to help us iron these out, and we're really close. I feel like you can tell specifically the last 2 weeks on our videos, you've seen some more gameplay with all the wrestlers in there. We still see a couple sprites missing here and there, but you can really get a good feel for the announcement, the ring announcer. Now the graphics are overlaying there. And you can really see the progress we're making now, and we're really picking up steam. So it's going to be close. I think, really though, from a PR standpoint, and the guy who helps me with that, he's like, you got to pick a date. He's like, he likes what we're doing as far as it'll be done when it's done, and don't rush it out. But he's like, unfortunately, there's the silent, or the vocal minority out there. Not that I want to appease them, but I think it's also hard for people, even who aren't complaining about it, to get behind it if they don't know when it's coming out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if people know, even because I know a lot of people are like, yeah, it's great, it'll be done when it's done, and that's the majority of people that we talk to. It's like, when you're ready, release it. But with that said, I know personally, I'd like to have something to look forward to. So if I know whatever that date is, I can live with it, and I can plan accordingly if I'm on the other side of it. So that's why we want to get a date out there to people. And then we have some other cool announcements. Now, to answer your second part of your question, was the physical. So we're definitely looking into it. And I would say it's most definitely going to happen with the amount of interest we've gotten. So it'll come out. The physical will be after the digital release, which is, they like to gauge interest typically, and see the interest of the game and what's going. But I'm pretty confident there's going to be a physical release.
Yeah, and I don't know. I know Limited Run is doing a lot of different games for indie stuff. So I don't know what their stipulation is, but yeah, I would definitely be down the front. Like, there you go. I might buy the game 3 times if you make a physical release, because I know I'm a sucker for collecting things. I'm one of the old school gamers. Believe it or not, I don't have Game Pass. The guys in the chat can tell you, I'm the opposite. I'm so really old school. Like, I can't picture the day, and don't even want to see the day when there's no disc-based consoles. I'm a collector. I love the artwork. I even miss back in the day, the manuals from the games, because I'd sit there and I'd look at the case and I'd go through the manual. I used to love seeing the customized artwork and stuff. And when my friends come over to my house and they see my physical game collection, there's something that is still, you can't replace that look. They walk in, they see these games on the shelf, and they go, wow. But I could have 3,000 games on my hard drive, and you go, I got 3,000 games. They go, cool. But they see 100 games in your cabinet, and they go, wow. It's just something about that. I'm very old school. I told my friend, maybe I'll get Game Pass when xCloud becomes really big and it's very consistent, because I would like to take this stuff on the go. That's why I want to buy RetroMania for my Switch, because I want to take it on the go, and I'll buy it on my Xbox because I want to play it on my big screen TV too. Well, I guess I can do that with the Switch, but hey, I'll buy it twice. I don't mind. Maybe I'll buy it 3 times. I'll buy it on every platform. And speaking of, how many platforms is it coming out for? Just to clarify, because somebody's asking, will the game release on Steam?
Yeah, so Steam, Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and then maybe some unknown platforms that people might not be aware of that I can't really say much about yet because it's not finalized. But
okay, I think we can rule out the new Amico, though, right?
Yeah, no, we will not be on the Amico. It's something I'm definitely looking into, because I kind of like the concept of that, but
I do.
We'll see how it goes. I mean, I like Tommy's very personable.
Yeah.
He's and very passionate about what they're doing, and I'm very interested in it. We're talking to them about possibly doing a wrestling game. Who knows?
That'd be cool.
Yeah. But it wouldn't be they're not into the pixel style, and I'm okay with that. I would like to probably do something different anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So
That'd be cool. I tell you, after the wrestling game, here's one to consider because this is also a genre that gets no love. A hockey game. I would love to see a spiritual successor to Blades of Steel.
I love Blades of Steel.
I, I,
Or
could,
should I
I
say
could see it
Blades
now.
of Steel?
I could see Blades of Steel done with obviously just a little bit better graphics, more of a 16-bit Blades of Steel, and
Right.
and you could call it Legends of Hockey, and maybe like sign the old guys that are retired and put a couple dudes on each team.
Yeah, there you go.
Would be nuts, eh?
Oh, I would love it. I would love it. I'll tell you, my favorite. I still to this day play NHL '94.
Oh yes, and you can get it on the new version apparently too now.
Yeah, I mean that was, but I preferred the 16-bit graphics to that game more so than the real life ones personally.
Yeah.
And then I don't say that for all games. I'm definitely not. Oh, back in my day, I'm not that kind of person because I love the new Spider-Man. Well, not new anymore. It came out a couple years ago, but the PS4 Spider-Man. I'm looking forward to the enhanced version on the PS5. That's one of the ones I'm looking forward to. But so I do love new school stuff as well. But I really I still get together with a group of guys I grew up with, and we still always go back to playing hockey.
Yeah.
That and Tecmo Bowl, American
Tecmo
football.
Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, it's well, like I said, just back on that, Tommy Tellerico and Amico, we wish them all the best and success because I like what he's trying to do there is just bring simplified family entertainment back in the home at a reasonable price, and you got to commend them for that.
Absolutely.
They've had a lot of delays. They were supposed to release that console
10, 20, yeah.
Yeah, and now it's pushed to the is it coming out? Yeah, it's coming out this year, right?
No, I think it was pushed to April next year.
Oh, yes. It was supposed to come out this year. That's correct. Yeah. Yes. And I just want to go back on the point of games because a lot of guys in the chat, I don't know how they feel about it, but that's something too. Like you talked about the prices of games, and you're totally right. I mean, you're probably a little bit older than me. I'm 44.
I'm 45, 1 year.
There you go. So I've been around the block, and I remember paying, I said, those astronomical prices for 16-bit cartridges. I paid $120 Canadian for Strider when it first came out.
I remember that. I had that game too.
It was the big promotion. I think it was the first 16-bit cartridge, was it? 16 meg cartridge, I think it was at the time. Yeah. It was something like that. And like you said, it was Street Fighter was expensive. There was a lot of games expensive. And people just forget that we paid a lot more theoretically for games back in the day, and N64 cartridges were super expensive. And now these games really haven't astronomically gone up, and people are complaining. But I do get it too, because here in Canada, we saw that some of the new PlayStation games and some of the third-party games are going to be like $89.99 Canadian. So that's $90, and then you got your tax, and depending on where you live, that can be quite expensive. So theoretically, in some places, you're paying pretty much $100 a pop for a game. So that's a lot of money to drop down on one game. And if you buy a lot of games in a run of a year, that's even more money still.
Right.
So.
For sure.
But that's the one thing that I find too with the Game Pass situation, and I've seen this, is where, back in the day, like say a game like Gears of War 5, people would have just ran out and bought it full price. But as soon as they found out everything's going to Game Pass, or any game that sort of is on my friends list is sort of like, unless it's a must buy, if it's somewhere in between to go, I'm going to wait for it to go to Game Pass. And I'm not 100% sure if that's beneficial or not. And I try to keep telling people that, like I said, if that's what the game is, if that's as much as the game means to you, that you're just going to wait for Game Pass, then maybe the game is not doing something right. It's not speaking with you. You know what I mean? Because for me, when I want a game, I just go out and buy it. I don't care what other platforms. I just get it day one, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's gonna the one thing that could happen is you're gonna see less game developers, and maybe it's become oversaturated. Who knows? But maybe you'll see if I get a game, I better not get a patch day one if I'm spending $100 for it. You know what I mean?
Well, I think those days are long behind us now.
Everything's patched day one.
Be the norm. Call of Duty, oh my God, like Modern Warfare, every time they get an update, it's like 80 gigs. It's like killing my hard drive. Like, holy mackerel. Like, yeah, but I don't know, not to get off topic, but I think RetroMania is going to do really well, because you said at the top of the show, it's a genre that isn't oversaturated anymore. Maybe back in the PlayStation 2 era and stuff, there was a fair bit of wrestling games. There was a lot of different licensees and different companies. And in the 16-bit era as well, like I said, Acclaim was huge in the wrestling, and there was a few other ones. But yeah, right now, like there isn't a lot of, say, wrestling competition. So if you like fighting games, wrestling games in general, I guess this is definitely going to be a fantastic purchase for people. And again, it is the official sequel to WrestleFest, and like me, I have fond memories of that game. And going to the arcade, it was always one of those that I wanted to drop some quarters in, and I can't wait to see how your game pans out when it finally releases. All right, so now that we got all that on the way, I just got a couple lighter questions for you, and then I'm just going to see if the chat has any questions for you as well. I think you already answered this one. Obviously, who is your favorite wrestler of all time, and who is your current favorite?
Anyone from the RetroMania roster.
Good answer.
You know what, though? I like playing in our game. Jeff Cobb, you may not be familiar with if you don't watch much. He was in Ring of Honor. I think he's now with New Japan a lot now. Well, now everything's so in flux. He was on AEW once or twice. I love his move set. He does this move called Tour of the Islands, and it was very important to me to get that move right in RetroMania. The original, I love Ted DiBiase's Power Slam back in the day. It was like the best looking Power Slam of anyone could do. And I love doing that. I could do that move over and over in WrestleFest. I just loved, like, the Ultimate Warrior did it, but it was all modeled after Ted DiBiase. It's real life Power Slam. And Jeff Cobb's Tour of the Islands is a similar type move, but he actually twists his whole body around to do the move. It's pretty cool. But so he's one of my personal favorites. But I Warhorse is, I'm gonna mark out for the guys in my game. So I'll stick to that answer. Anybody in RetroMania Wrestling.
Well, here's one I'm pretty sure that you can give more of a definitive answer. Sure. Who is the best RetroMania Wrestling player at your studio?
Well, it changes because we make some tweaks to the gameplay here and there to even it out. I would say my oldest son is better than me, which is kind of annoying. He helps me test. He's gone to conventions with me, and he basically has played very early on. The build we had at the Too Many Games convention in June of last year, we didn't have AI programmed yet. So he had to play against everybody to teach them how to play. So he was able to he knew every nuance and helped us tweak the gameplay from that. But since then, he's become the best.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, you might have to do a little video or something showing some RetroMania action one of these days when the game is out in the wild and different things. Look forward to it. We got Froggy T right in the chat who says, how do you test balancing? What do you look for there?
Yeah, so it's really, we have the different characters have different, like a little bit of speed difference between them and a little bit of power difference between the moves they can do. The other piece of it is certain players have specific moves that are beneficial, for example, in the Retro Rumble than others have. So we have to balance that and not give any one wrestler too many of the, I don't want to say cheap moves, but easier moves to get eliminations in the Retro Rumble. But we have basically, it's all text driven, the move damage by wrestler by move type. So if you are specifically able to do a DDT, for example, maybe two different characters might do the DDT, but one might do more damage than the other. So again, though, keep in mind, we're not Smash Brothers or a fighting game where we're super worried about balance, because we don't have that much deviation between the characters. There definitely is some deviation, don't get me wrong, but it's not as intricate as a fighting game per se. It's more about pick up and play, do cool moves, and then the strategy between where you are and where you are in the ring, how you interact outside the ring, and things like that.
Gotcha. Nice. Good stuff. Let me see here. Do you have any particular funny or amazing moments during this process to share with the audience about, anything that kind of, because I know a lot of times you see those, the vlogs and different things where, they get a weird piece of code and stuff goes funny or something. Any particular stories up to this point that strike out at you?
We've had a million of the code things where just thing looks crazy. War Horses, in one of the animations, and I inadvertently posted a video clip of it. It looked like he was walking like constipated, like he was had to run to the bathroom or something when he ran to the ring, and it was a messed up entrance walk that we never fixed, and I just didn't catch it until I had already posted the video. But a funny development story, about a year ago now, actually a little less than a year ago, I was at Keystone Comic-Con convention, and Tommy Dreamer had sent me an email like on a Wednesday. And he's like, hey, House of Hardcore is going to be at this comic convention, putting on shows. I'll have space if you want to come down and demo the game to anybody who comes up. I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. So I go down there with my son, my oldest, and we set up, and then I end up going into the ring with Tommy and Monique. And I get in. I've never been in a wrestling ring before, but I've seen it a million times. I just figure I'll put my leg through, go under the middle rope, or go under the top rope in between the middle. So I go in fine, and then I almost trip. My back leg catches coming into the ring. And I was like, I didn't trip, I didn't fall completely, but I staggered going in, and I felt like, and I don't know if he made a look, but I just felt like Tommy just shaking his head at me, and it was pretty embarrassing. I'm not sure if he definitely even saw it, to be honest, but I felt like he did, and I felt like he was staring at me at that point.
Somebody's got that video somewhere.
Yeah, but it was fun. It was fun getting into a ring.
Awesome. Jesse Darby in the chat says, are there any AEW wrestlers in there on the roster?
Technically, yes. Colt Cabana is currently in AEW and signed there, so he is an AEW talent. He's the only one that's currently under contract there. There's you never know. I'll just say you never know what the future holds. But we have Colt. We did try to talk to them very early on. We had sent something to Cody, and it was right before they had announced AEW. So we were talking to him the couple months before Thanksgiving, before they announced it. And we were trying to work something out, but I think they just had a lot on their plate at the time. So we'll see. They're coming out with their game probably, I would say 2022 would be my guess. Maybe the end of 2021. I would be surprised, although they have a lot more money than we do, so maybe they can get it done quicker. But
gotcha.
But yeah, you never know.
How about any plans to potentially add a female division of RetroMania Wrestling, maybe in the future, depending on, like, again, the success of your game or what have you?
We definitely something we would like to do. We were looking at doing it initially, but our roster was going to be 16 max, and we wanted to do a full women's division, and we just didn't have. I'll be honest, we didn't have the budget to do everything at once.
Right.
There's some stuff we had to cut, and we have to either wait to do in an update later, or do a sequel if we do well in the first game. So, in an ideal world, I'd have an unlimited budget for this, but unfortunately, that's not the case.
No, and that's totally understandable, and I think everybody in the chat understands your plight. Again, that's never easy, making a game, and certainly when again you have time and budget restrictions, and in this COVID world too makes it even harder. We got James in the chat. Any particular wrestler that you were, I guess, super awesome to work with, or was super awesome to work with you, or that you really enjoyed?
I'd say I've gotten to know Stevie Richards really well the last couple of months, and I've gotten to know him. I've talked to him on the phone several times. I trade texts with him. He is really down to earth, and most of the guys are really. But I find I've had a lot in common with him. And actually, he used to manage a video game shop where I grew up. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the States. He grew up the same place, roughly a couple towns over. And he actually managed a video game store. And I met him there. And it was, he's not that much older than me. He's only a couple of years older than me. So he gets annoyed if I say I grew up watching him, because I'm like the same age as he is. And he's like, you're making me feel old. But, he has just been, no specific stories, but just in general, it's been great to get to know him. Tommy Dreamer's been awesome. He has helped out however he could and can with it. I've spent basically 2 days with him at a wrestling show or almost 3 actually, 2 wrestling shows and a convention.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 8 hours a day with him 3 different days, so I've got to know him a little bit, and he's a really good guy. Again, down to earth. You always are, you're a little tentative to meet people that you know on TV,
Absolutely.
who you really like on TV, and you're afraid of if you'll still like them after you meet them in person.
Yeah.
But they've really, everybody, Blue Meanie, Brian Heffron, awesome guy. I spent a day with him. I spent a couple days with him as well at Too Many Games convention. Or no, he didn't come out to Too Many Games. He was at PAX East with me. So he was awesome. He came up. Stevie was supposed to come up that weekend, and something, he had a family emergency. Brian was able to do it on a moment's notice. Him and Mrs. Meanie came up, and they were awesome. So really a lot of great people I've met through this, and it's been awesome.
Wow, that is great stories. Great to hear. We only got a couple more questions. We're going to let you get out of here.
Okay.
I guess my last one for you is, what was your favorite I don't even know if I should have to ask you this one, but what was your favorite old school wrestling game, and what do you think of the current wrestling games, like I said, which is sort of oddly fallen out of favor with fans? They just don't seem to have the magic anymore like games of the past. So I don't know if you definitely.
Well, I'll say, other than the obvious, which is WrestleFest, I'll add that little asterisk out of that, because that's definitely my best favorite. But I would say probably a prequel really to the WrestleFest, but it's a Technosa Japan game called Mania. That was another arcade game, but that was the first wrestling game I saw in the arcade. And I was in love with it. I think I saw Tag Team Wrestling actually came out before that, but I think I played Mania first. I think they were a year apart. And that really captured, like, I was just starting to watch wrestling on television, and it had a Road Warrior Animal kind of knockoff called the Insane Warrior, and I just loved that game. So that was my favorite. And I think to answer the second part of the question is, the controls are just too complex now unless you have a lot of time. And if I was a kid, I'm sure I wouldn't have a problem with it, and not because just I'm older, but just because of the time sink involved in playing some of the newer games. To get better at them, I think you need to spend a little bit more time to learn the controls, and I think the fun factor can be lost if you don't know the controls as much. Whereas a game like RetroMania that we're making, you'll be able to pick it up and play it pretty easily and have fun with it. You'll be able to do the special moves right away. So it's either be pick up and play. With that said, we're trying to add a lot of depth to it as well and make the matches so much fun. I'll tell you right now, I still go back and I play WrestleFest. I can play through Saturday Night's Main Event for fun. And I won't sit there and play it for hours, but I'll go back to it constantly, play a couple Royal Rumbles till I win it, and then play Saturday Night's Main Event through. So just that being pick up and play and just pulling off moves needs to be fun. And as long as that's the case and you can pick up and play it, and I can pick up, and that's one of the things I think I'm drawn to the Switch as a lot as well, is that it seems to be there's more types of games like that on there, where there aren't as big of time sinks as some of the other. Now, with that said, I play Skyrim on the PC, and I played it on the Switch as well. I think I probably prefer it because I'm into mods with the PC version of it as well. I've sunk for about four months. I played nothing but Skyrim. Which is a big thing for me. And before that, Diablo 3 was another big game for me. So I'm not against that. And not that Skyrim, the controls are more complex, but I don't think they're over. But there is definitely a learning curve to learn how to play something like that. And with Diablo, it's just there's so much to do and so many items and things like that. So I'm not against it at all. But I think specifically in wrestling, we just don't have the alternative, right? We have the complex version, but we don't have the simplified version. I think we need both. Right, we need to be able to do both.
I agree with you, and I'm, like I said, that for that reason alone, I'm super excited to play RetroMania, because it's just going to be something I can invest 20 minutes in when I just want to get a couple of quick matches off and not feel overwhelmed. And I think a lot of people feel the same. Just speaking of that, do you guys have things like any adjustability options in the game, sort of like an AI slider, that sort of thing?
Yep, we have an AI slider in there, and we have other things like the way the game works, it's similar to how WrestleFest worked. It had a momentum meter, but it didn't show it. But you had to progress and do your moves. So if I'm Jake the Snake, I would start with being able to do a body slam or a snapmare, and then I would progress to like a side suplex. Eventually, I'd work up to the D. I think there may have only been one other move, and then you get to the DDT. So we have a similar situation, but you can actually move your momentum bar to start anywhere you want in this game settings. And then you can do your difficulty slider. We have a near fall mechanic in there as well that you'll kick out if you have no energy at all. You can move that slider as well. And it's certain little things. If it happens rarely, it's kind of cool if even if you're playing against somebody and they kick out when they shouldn't have. But one of the big things I like is I knew in WrestleFest if I did the DDT, 9 times out of 10 the match was over, and I like that about finishers.
Yeah.
A finisher, the match should be over. So if you hit your finisher, the match 9 times out of 10 is what we're going for. The match will be over.
Yeah, that was the '80s wrestling. When you did your finisher, it was done. But like the new age wrestling now, it's like, oh yeah, like Brock Lesnar do like the F5 4 times on the guy and just look it up, right? You're just like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was awesome, man. Like I said, everybody's really excited for this game. I certainly know I am. I can't wait. I'll be, again, watching your social media feed very closely over the next little while. Anthony Chiba, Saturday Night Slam Masters.
Another great one.
Was that the Neo Geo game?
Capcom. No, that was a 3-count bout was the Neo Geo one.
Gotcha.
Fire Suplex in Japan.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of wrestling games back in the day. It's just unbelievable. I think the first one I ever played was I think it was called Pro Wrestling on the Sega Master System. Like,
yeah, that had the cover. The guy had his own head in a headlock.
Speaking of the covers and artwork, I love the artwork that you're doing for the all the promos and the wrestler graphics that you see on your page. It kind of gives me that Mad Magazine feel. So kudos to your art person who's ever doing that.
Yeah, that's Fu Essence Studios, Fran and Miguel. They're out of Spain. I've known the two of them actually for over 10 years now. They did some. We were going to do a fighting game back in 2013, and we did some entry level stuff, or not entry, but some proof of concept type of stuff. But I've gotten to know them, and I've kept in contact with them, and they do phenomenal work.
They do. Like I said, I love what you're going for there. I just love the way it looks awesome. You see like Tommy Dreamer, the cartoon-esque, how it looks. It's just great. So kudos to them guys, and kudos to your whole team, man. Again, from all of us here, all of us fans who are super excited, not only for wrestling, but someone that's taking initiative to bring back that classic arcade look and feel. We applaud you for that. Thank you so much. And like I said, we can't wait to dive into this game. Again, we'll keep people updated on the release date, as maybe I can get you back here as during your launch period or whatever would be really cool, and maybe get some reaction to how fans are enjoying it, that sort of thing. But that's it. We're going to let you get out of here. I appreciate this much time. I didn't know you'd even stay this long. But thank you so much for that. And just let everybody in the chat know, and the people that are going to watch this video afterwards, where they can keep in touch with you, where they can check out more material on your game. I know you guys have a website and all that stuff. So now's the time to plug it.
Yeah, RetroManiaWrestling.com has all of our information. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We do a weekly video as far as the progress update. As you can see, what we're working towards, where we're at with everything. It's very transparent, the good, the bad, and the ugly with everything I go through there. And yeah, you can follow us at Retrosoft Studios on all social media.
There you go, guys. Go follow Retrosoft Studios. Make sure you pick up your copy of the game. Like I said, it's available on just about everything and more platforms to come in the near future. So go check out your copy. Support this great dev so those guys can keep these games coming over the next little while. Can't wait to see any DLC plans or et cetera, edit characters and stuff. We're chomping at the bit here. Again, we thank you for your time. I look forward to chatting with you again soon. Chat, you guys have been awesome. I will see you guys a bit later. Don't forget, I will be on Primetime Gaming with Mr. Boomstick XL here in just a little over an hour, and Gaming After Dark tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern time. That is 8 Mountain time. Yeah, because I'm out here in Alberta, Canada. So I look forward to seeing you guys then. Again, Mike, thanks so much for your time. Wish your team all the best. Get her done, man. Time to lay the finishing moves down on that one right now.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.